The black market has become an integral part of many people's lives in Cuba. As evidence of the rapid growth of the black market, men that buy newspapers just immediately were sold on the same day referred to as Viejos del Barrio. They're so common to even have a nickname. Unsurprisingly, these black market jobs don't pay well, so many Cubans work in the black market and for the public sector. However, despite having two incomes, the Cubans aren't thriving and they aren't rich. They're still struggling to meet their basic needs. As one Cuban nurse says, if you don't have a side job, you don't eat. So the black market jobs aren't here to make the Cubans well off, they're here to help them survive. So people working these difficult public sector jobs also have to work in the black market just so they can feed themselves and their families. This is a serious problem and Cuba has been trying to address it for quite some time. But where did it all begin? Well, it goes back to Fidel Castro. Back in 1959, Fidel Castro led Cubans in the Socialist Revolution. This is when Cuba started adopting more communist policies in their politics and economy. As a result, the economy was no longer a free market and all private industry was seized by the government and prices for all goods were seized by the government. However, the Cuban economy wasn't very strong at the time. They needed some help. So the Soviet Union stepped in. Due to Cuba's strong support of communism, the Soviet Union was happy to help, and their help came financially through subsidies. For a while this worked. Cuba was able to make ends meet with the help from the Soviet Union. However, the Union eventually collapsed, and the Cuban economy suffered. To this day, the Cuban economy still struggles feeding its people, with rations slowly decreasing. However, back in the 1990s, this was especially a problem. So, they had to do something. In the early 1990s, the Cuban government recognized this issue and started handing out private licenses for private businesses. Since Fidel Castro was replaced in 2008, the number of private licenses has increased significantly. From 2008 to 2013, the number of private licenses has nearly tripled. However, these private licenses didn't work as effectively as one would predict due to strong regulations on them. Such regulations can be seen in the food business. Back before up to recent, when regulations are slowly being relaxed, private bars, restaurants, and cafes were allowed to have a maximum of 50 people in their restaurant at a time. This was to help prevent too much competition in the public sector. This, unfortunately, was hindering progress, and so eventually such regulations are being relaxed. However, the public sector also has some serious issues in Cuba. Due to people getting paid so little and being guaranteed the same page, irregardless of how hard they work, they choose not to work very hard at a public sector job. Often, public sector stores in Cuba have too many people not doing anything. However, they can't really be blamed since they have little incentive for working at a public sector job, and they also have black market jobs on the side. Why would a Cuban worker choose to work hard at a public sector job if they can just work their black market job and make more money? They might as well save their energy and work harder where it matters. A taxi cab driver in Cuba is quoted saying, "My worst days, I make $60. A doctor makes about $40 per month." This means that a taxi cab driver makes approximately $2,000 per month. That is 50 times what a doctor makes. The taxi cab driver being quoted is actually a trained engineer, but he left his public job to make more money in a private industry job that used none of his advanced training. This is a serious problem in Cuba. You have people like this engineer leaving their public high-skilled job for their private low-skilled job. The well-trained and educated working force will choose not to utilize their skills due to the allure of relatively luxurious wages at these low-skilled private sector jobs. As a result, there's been a huge issue of the balance of people who work at these skilled jobs and unskilled jobs. A large migration of skilled workers from the public jobs to low-skilled jobs in the private sector in the 1990s was referred to as the special period. However, there's some bigger ramifications for the big migration to the private sector. Cuba has always been a relatively income-equal country. However, due to the rise of the private sector, there's been more and more income inequality. In pre-1990s, Cuba had a Gini coefficient of 0.22. However, by 1999, well into the special period, the Gini coefficient rose to 0.41. There are some other big issues in the Cuban economy, especially with corruption in government. Probably the worst of all the corruption issues is the practice of spontaneous privatization. This is when a public firm is directly given to an individual without the need to pay or help start it up. This is far too strong advantage for many individuals to have on the private market. In conclusion, the Cuban government is fighting corruption to eventually help establish a strong private sector. However, they need to find a way to fight income inequality.